Let me, at this juncture, invite Father Destiny Amenuvo to give us the opening prayer. Please put your hands together for him.
Shall we please stand and pray? In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. God our Father, we thank you. We thank you for our lives. We thank you for the many blessings you have endowed us with. We thank you for this country, Ghana, and its leadership. We thank you also for the citizenry. As we gather for this forum, we plead your presence with us. We're praying that you would guide us with your spirit in our interactions, in our deliberations. As always, we pray that you grant unto our country good governance, that our leaders will take the right decisions for the growth and development of this country. We pray also for responsible citizenship, that we'll all endeavor to be responsible citizens, that Ghana will work again. We pray that you help us to uphold justice for all, that freedom shall be our hallmark. We pray that you help us to eschew corruption. We pray that you help us to build a united nation, that Ghana will be a beacon of hope for our world today. Bless this gathering, that whatever we do here will be to the greater glory of your name. We meet all our prayers through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thank you very much, Father Amenuvo. Now, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, let me proceed by acknowledging the Board of Members of the Solidare Governance Forum, and then also some other distinguished personalities who have joined us. So I'll start in no particular order with the composition of the board of Solidare Governance Forum. Now, it's extremely important that we do this because they say he who calls for equity must come with clean hands. We're here to discuss governance issues. And so Solidare Governance Forum wants you to know that they have a very strong board of directors. And I'll start with Mr. Ibrahim Bedu. He's the chairman. Please give me a wave. Please put your hands together for him. Mr. Ibrahim Bedu is the chairman of the board of directors. Now you have Miss Margaret Ansay. She's the director of protocol. Please give us a wave. Samuel Adom Buchi. He is the director of programs. That's it. Nana Kwabna Eje Anomafo is the director of finance. Mr. Hanan Gondado is the director of logistics. No, he was seated here. I don't know where he's gone to, but he's with us. Sam Atukwekwe, director legal. Thank you very much for being here. Alexander Chumberry, the director policy planning. If you're here, please give us a wave. Thank you very much. Benjamin Suman is the executive director of this organization. Thank you very much, Ben. You guys are doing a great job. Now, Mr. David Kumiado, if you're here, please give us a wave. You're the head of research. Thank you. Thank you very much for being here as well. Now, there are other personalities here I will be introducing. I think I saw Professor Ransford Jampo. He's also with us here. Prof, please give us a wave. Right. Please put your hands together for him as well. And then I'll give you, well, it's a tall list. I'll bring you the rest of the names of the other personalities here. But I think at this juncture we can proceed by inviting Miss Margaret Ansay, she's the Director of Protocol, to introduce the chairperson for this occasion. Please put your hands together for her.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I am happy to be called upon for this august occasion to introduce to you the wonderful chairperson for today. She is a Ghanaian whose exceptional skill in academic prowess has taken her from her hometown of the Kwabri East in the Ashanti region all the way to the United Kingdom and also the United States, where she rose to become a senior executive in the Internal Revenue Service, that's the IRS, before entering into the private sector to help manage the tax responsibilities of American organizations and individuals. Ms. Barbara Echampon, a dynamic and highly qualified tax accountant with extensive knowledge of accounting principles, taxation policies, and income tax procedures. She is a fellow of Solidare, Ghana, and known for her demonstrable excellence in analyzing, reporting, and consolidating financial data, ensuring that the full life cycle of financial management responsibilities are covered and the associated financial risk is managed. She is the CEO of Rema Financial Services, Rema True Care and Transports. She is also the founder of Asante Professional Clubs in the United States of America and a founder of Love Gives Foundation and also the District Fund Trustee of the Rotary Club in the United States. With her British and American experience, Ms. Barbara Echampon is back home today to listen to our speakers and also help us live here resolved to help develop our governance. Ladies and gentlemen, can you please help me welcome Ms. Barbara Echampon to chair today's program. Thank you.
Maggie, thank you very much. I think it's fair that the chairperson for this occasion is given the opportunity to tell us whether indeed she has accepted the role of a chairperson or not. And I'm sure she'll just do that in a minute. Madam, first of all, good morning. Good to see you. Have you accepted to be the chairperson?
Thank you. And great. This is one very formidable young lady in Ghana today. She's very passionate about the development of Ghana, and I am certainly most scared to get on her bad side as she's very principled. Please help me today. Give a round of applause to Miss Margaret. So, Mr. Speaker, for today, distinguished members of the panel, colleague fellows of Solidare Ghana, distinguished and special invited guests, distinguished audience, ladies and gentlemen, I dive off my heart today for this great attendance at this all-important and very memorable event. I also want to say a huge thank you to the organizers of this program for the immaculate work that you have done. Thank you all. Aiko. It is with great humility that I accept to chair this great function. Solidare Ghana. Benefit of those who do not know or have not heard much about Solidare Ghana. This group, civil society organization whose main objective is to promote good governance and to recommend impactful and practical solutions to all the socio-economic woes that we face in our dear country. Distinguished guests, colleague fellows, ladies and gentlemen, I have resolved to steer the affairs to a successful end, but I cannot do this alone. Thank you. I cannot do it without your support and participatory interest and contribution in the discussions that will ensue later. Kindly support Solidare's cause because it is a good cause, one that could change the trajectory of our dear country. So once again, with humility, I do accept to chair this event and do my best. Thank you and God bless you all.
I think she deserves better than that. Yes, I believe so. Now, distinguished, thank you very much, Ms. Barbara Champon. Now, let me just say that I left out one very important and a distinguished guest who is also with us here. Dr. Ali Dutsedu is a founding member of the Solidare Governance Forum. In fact, he's going to be our main speaker for today. Please put your hands together for him. He's also here with us. He's actually a fellow. Thank you for that quick correction. Now, why are we here? I'm not the speaker for this occasion, but I just felt that it's important that we put what we're doing here in its proper context. After which, I will be informing you who our panel members are. Or, let me do it this way. Let me rather invite our panel members to take their seats, and then I'll proceed by telling you why we're here. So once I mention your name, please take a seat here on my very left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we're expecting 6 of you to take your seats. I'll start with Professor Ni Noi Dowona. Professor Ninoy Dowona, if you're here, please take your seat on my very left. Now, Professor Ninoy Dowona is the head department of soil science at the University of Ghana and a fellow of Solidare Governance Forum. Please put your hands together for him. Yes, please do. And then we also have Professor Ransford Jampo. Professor Ransford Jampo is an associate professor of political science, director of the Center for European Studies, University of Ghana, Legon, with 14 years of teaching and research experience. He is also the UTAC secretary for the University of Ghana chapter. Please, a hand of applause. And then there's Dr. Grace Ayensu Dankwa. She is a medical director, Sage Medical Center, professor of surgery from the University of Utah Health. She is an adjunct lecturer, University of Cape Coast Medical School, serves as a member of the Advisory Committee of Ghana's Food and Drugs Authority. She's the Chief Executive Officer of Fast Fit Pharmacy Clinic and Medical Supplies and the founding CEO of Healing Hands Organization. Okay, she's not here with us yet, but she will be joining us hopefully very shortly. And then we have Mr. Michael Abbey. Now, Michael Abbey is a programs coordinator at the Frederick Ebert Foundation, responsible for democratic processes, that's parliament, political parties, training programs, gender justice, and security. Yes, that's him. Please put your hands together for him as well. And then our indefatigable, very hardworking Mr. Mensah Thompson, proud recipient of the 2021 Ghana Leadership Award for his advocacy and the executive director, ASEPA Ghana. Please put your hands together for him. No, he's a big man. Yeah, he's a big man. Mr. Gregory K. Okanse is a social advocate, development communicator, political observer, and a fellow African Education Watch. He's also here with us, I believe. Please put your hands together for him. Right, he's here to join us. That's fine. So I need to also remind you that this program is being aired live on Wazor TV and XYZ TV as well. So back to the issue I raised earlier about, so why are we here? Now, the Solidare Governance Forum believes that good governance is an essential condition, is an absolute necessity to development or national development. Now, the essence of we being here is to try and establish that nexus, because some will say it's just a hypothesis. Researchers will go out there and test it, whether indeed that's the case. So we want to know whether the nexus between good governance and national development really does exist. What's the relationship like? What's the correlation like? And when we even say good governance, what do we mean? What is governance? What is good governance? What's national development? You and I know that between the two political parties, the NDC and MPP, the NDC has said time and again that, look, you can't say you're developing this country without investing massively in physical infrastructure. The MPP, to a very large extent, says, well, we want to develop more in, how do you call it, human capital. They say they want to spend more on human capital, so we see free SHS and so on and so forth. So even amongst the two political parties, there isn't any definitive consensus that's been reached on what we mean by development or national development. And that's why that conversation has got to be had. And hopefully, after this, we'll take some lessons home. So at this juncture, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, let me invite our main speaker for today, who hopefully would help us come to some answers on some of these nagging questions that I've just asked. Dr. Alidu Seidu is our main speaker. Now, he's a senior lecturer, University of Ghana, Department of Political Science, fellow Solidare Ghana. Now, Dr. Alidu Seidu, in his formative years in Tamale, the capital of the northern region, was spotted early as having superior intellectual capacity. Now, just a few days ago, his friend, Professor Rasford Jampo, I'm told, described Dr. Alidu Seidu as calm but very strong and highly knowledgeable political scientist. He is currently the co-convener, senior fellow, Maria Sibylla Merian Institute for Advanced Studies in Africa on Parliament and Democracy in Africa. Now, he has worked closely with and for numerous policy think tanks, including the Partnership for African Social and Governance Research, based in Nairobi, Kenya, Center for International Development Issues, that's based in the Netherlands, and also the Institute for Development Studies at the University of Sussex, or Success, and then also the Institute for Democratic Governance, the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung or Foundation, the United Nations Development Program, varieties of democratic or democracy project based in the University of Gothenburg in Sweden, and many organizations. Now, Madam Chairperson, ladies and gentlemen, here comes our lecturer for today, our main speaker for the day, Dr. Alidu Seidu. Please put your hands together for him.
Good morning to you all, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great privilege to be given a platform of this kind to speak to very important national issues that concern our development. I would like to thank Solidare Foundation for giving me this very important a platform. When I was asked to speak to this issue, and then I saw the list of co-speakers or discussants, I got intimidated, and still I am intimidated, because these are people who have accomplished a lot academically, in personal life, choosing professions and careers. And then I've been asked to speak to an issue, and then with them, or they will discuss what I'm going to speak to. Looking at the likes of Professor Rasford Jampo, my senior colleague at the department, and then my very good friend Mike Labe, and all the other co-panelists. So I'm just like an innocent lamb that's thrown into the lion's den. But I have a very good friend, Margaret, and I do hope when it becomes very crucial, she'll protect me. I usually don't use handkerchiefs, but today I came with a white handkerchief, so you see me waving it, it means I'm calling for support. Now back to business. I'm asked to speak to the topic, good governance and development in Ghana, interrogating the relationship. It is a very big topic to discuss, both good governance and then development. So what I'm going to do is to try to set a little bit of assumptions which will guide the presentation that I'm going to make. And my first assumption is simple, that there is a relationship. I'm assuming that there is a relationship between good governance and development. And my aim simply is to interrogate that relationship. My second assumption is simple. If there is a relationship between good governance and development, then development is actually the end. Good governance is only a means to achieving that end. I will further assume that people are both the means and end of development. In every development processes, the people are very central. They contribute as human resource to achieve the ultimate aim of development, which benefits them as well. My final assumption is that it's controversial, but it's often discussed widely in the literature, that democracy is the closest form of government that can give us good governance, even though a lot of people may disagree or contest it. Following these assumptions, my presentation is going to be as follows. I'm first of all going to clarify the concept of development and examine its typologies. Then I'll set out the distinctive features of development by looking at the various indicators that are used to measure them. Then I'll clarify the concept of good governance and look at its unique features. I will then interrogate the relationship between good governance and development. I use good governance and democracy interchangeably because of my third assumption, because people believe that the closest form to achieving good governance is best practice in a democracy, rather than any other system of government. So people invariably equate democracy to good governance. So my slip of tongue is actually conceptually informed. So my last assumption, give me a minute. I'm now going to conclude after all this. So then, I'm going to conclude by revisiting my assumptions and either confirming them or rejecting them. And then, rather than take a very firm position on issues of this, I'm going to rather pose rhetoric questions that will further guide the subsequent discussion that my co-panelists are going to have. Especially when you have very powerful people like this, you don't take a very firm conclusion. You let them also have a lot to discuss. Now, the concept of development. Development is very complex, dynamic, contested, contextual, and elusive. It is complex because it is multifaceted, multidimensional, and all-encompassing. So that makes it a very complex concept. But it is dynamic because it's not static. What people may cherish as development today may not be the same maybe in the next 5, 10, 20 years. So development is not static. So because it's not static, it's very difficult to actually define it over time. It is contested simply because it's complex and it's dynamic. So what may be considered a need for a specific group of people, and for that matter, development to them, may not be the same for other group of people. So because of the difference and variations in our understanding and need of what constitutes development, it becomes highly contested concept. It is also contextual because development is highly local. Every group of people have what they consider to be a need or a priority in terms of what? Development. So if I need money to pay school fees, and you come and construct rules for me, I may not see it as developmental. If I actually need roads to PAL, and then you are giving me free money to do business, people may not see it as developmental. So it's highly contextual. And what may be a developmental need, say, for example, in Asia, may not be the same developmental need, for example, in Ghana or maybe in the United States of America. So when you put all these things together, you realize that it is a very slippery concept, highly elusive. So because of that, I am not going to provide any academic definition for development. I'm just going to try to explain what it is and what it stands for. It's largely made up of ideas. There has never been a developmental agenda without people thinking through what is important and what is not important for them. So it consists of ideas. It's also methods, the processes and methodology of doing something. It is procedural. It goes through stages of life. And it is action-oriented. You just don't promise development and then you run away from it. There is no development. What is actually development is manifestly putting into practice what you have promised or what you say you are going to do. But all these things are geared towards one thing: human progression and human satisfaction. If you do all these things and there is no progress and there is no satisfaction, then there is a lot of questions to be asked. Development can also be understood from the perspective of an increment or expansion in the pace or the size of an economy. And that leads to what? More production of goods and services. And finally, we can define development as freedom. And this is a very popular development pioneered by Professor Amartya Sen in his reconceptualization, largely supported by Mahmoud Belhak and then Amartya Sen, Mahmoud Belhak and Martha Nussbaum, largely from early 90s, 1990 to 1994. They said that development is not just about the people, but it is more about expanding the freedom of people to make life choices, deserving life choices that leads to what? A deserved life and a life that is more cherishable. Now, based on these explanations, I'm trying to make meaning of development, just teasing out from these issues, but also looking at various indicators that are used to measure development. So we can define development, one, as sustainable economic growth. We can also look at development as prudent economic management. We can look at development as achieving close to zero infant mortality. Development as reducing illiteracy rate in a country. Development as increasing life expectancy. Development as high school enrollment, progression, and completion. Development as high youth literacy rate. Development as providing economic opportunities for women. Development as expanding women's ownership of and control over assets in a country. Development as enhancing women's voice and then agency. We can further look at development as eradicating child malnutrition, as eradicating under 5 mortality rate in the country, as eradicating maternal mortality, respecting press freedom, providing an environment for dialogue and dissent, respect for human rights, making people happy. Happiness is a very important component of development. And we'll come to explore that. And the last bit of the Lord is enhancing citizens' freedom. Based on these explanations, we can talk about broadly 2 types of development. The first is what we call economic development, and the second is what we call human development. Largely, the economic development is the processes of maintaining a prudent, sound economy. I had already mentioned at the beginning that economic development as a conceptualization of development is purely a means, and the ultimate end is the human development. What then is good governance? Now, good governance is both a political and a developmental concept. So politically, it is about how political power is acquired, but not just that, and how it is used for the collective benefit of the citizenry. If you take a gun and overthrow a constitutional elected government, it affects the quality of good governance, or it no longer qualifies as good governance. If you hold an election and that election is not credible, it's not fair, it's not free, that election has the tendency to undermine the quality of good governance. So the way we acquire power is very important in our assessment of what constitutes government. But not just that, how we use that power. If you get power, do you suppress the freedom and the rights of your citizens? If you are given power, do you create a culture of silence? If you are given power, do you dictate and control what the media publish and not publish? If you get power, do you provide the enabling environment for development to occur? When you get power, do you promote or you start private businesses in your country? All these aspects of how we use power is very important in defining what good governance constitutes. But at the end of it all, these processes, the way we get power and how we use power, should be geared toward the benefit of the citizenry. Developmentally, it is usually a yardstick or mostly conditionalities that are used or required for or from assessing development assistance and aid. So good governance has now become one of the key conditionalities that countries need to perfect before you are able to receive aid or grant or development assistance from what? The largely developed northern economies. But developmentally, we can also look at governance as the management of both human and natural resources for sustained development in the country. What then are the conditions? If we assume good governance to be what I've just said, what then are the conditions? There are prevailing conditions. This has changed over time, but this is largely the first World Bank prescription in 1992 about what constitutes development, when they were increasingly getting concerned about the level at which the African economies were developing. So they prescribed that for good governance to occur, you must examine the form of what? Political regime. So there were different types of political regimes. So we have democracy and all the variant forms that it may take, whether liberal, social, egalitarian, procedural, electoral, whichever way. I think about 12 of those kinds of classifications. Even if it's democracy, is it a presidential or parliamentary system of democracy? Is it a military regime? Is it a dictatorship? Is it a developmental autocracy? Is it a developmental state? What kind of regime are you looking at? So the environment and the context, political context specifically, is quite important. How authority is exercised, I've already mentioned this, especially in the management of the country's economic and social resources, are very key in determining a smooth condition for good governance to occur. But also you are looking at government's capacity and design, government's capacity to design, formulate, and implement policies and discharge government functions. So the role of government is actually to enhance people's welfare and well-being. And one of the ways that this can be done is to do what? Policy formulation and implementation. And more importantly, the ability of government to discharge its core functions as has been entrusted to it by the people. At the same time that the World Bank was coming out with these conditions, the OECD also had conditions, because largely development assistance comes from them, for providing development assistance and aid to developing countries. And one of the conditionalities was legitimacy of the government. If you rig election and you come to power, then you are not legitimate. If you use the barrel of the gun to come to power, you are not legitimate. And there are several ways that the legitimacy of a government can be fraudulently acquired. And for that matter, the ability of the people to have confidence in you and to imbibe in you that kind of ethical and moral right to govern is very fundamental in setting the conditions for good governance. You're also looking at accountability of political and official elements of government. First of all, government is elected by the people, and elected political parties form government. So when governments are formed, they are supposed to be accountable to the people and not the other way around. When we begin to have people accounting to government, then we are gradually drifting away from the concept of what? Good governance. And then we are heading towards maybe authoritarianism. One of the conditions is also competence of government to make policy and deliver services. So if you are elected into government and you are not able to formulate a policy, or even when you formulate, you are not able to implement them, you are not able to deliver services that are required and needed by the people to live a decent, cherishable life, then you are missing the conditionalities of good governance. Respect for human rights and the rule of law. Very important. People have inalienable rights as citizens of a state. And that particular right should be enforced by government of the day, but not undermined in different forms. And the rule of law states that everyone is equal before the law, and we must be treated equally when we commit offenses or when we do good. So what then are the salient features of good governance? So the first has to do with accountability. And it is obvious that government must be held to account. So when you present a budget as government to the House of the Legislature, and the members of parliament who represent the people demand accountability, don't ask questions about what is contained in the budget and what the estimates are going to be used for, then we are not getting accountability. So largely, in a representative democracy, it is the responsibility of the members of the legislature to hold government to account for how our taxes are spent as citizens. Transparency. Government projects and policies and programs must not be in a lock and key. People have the right to know what is happening. There should be clear transparency about governance processes, deals, procurement, and all those things that makes people's life better. If you do not have transparency, then you are lacking in good governance. Responsiveness. Government just don't implement policies. Policies usually that are contained in the manifesto of political parties are usually the concerns and the needs and the challenges and the aspirations of the people. So to the larger extent, the policies, programs of every government must tally and sync with the needs of the ordinary human being and the citizens. Where responsiveness is lacking, then we are drifting far away from good governance. If government is doing something and the collectivity of the people say, what you are doing is not right, you are draining the public purse, or you are not doing this, and government continue to do that without listening to the people, especially where that has to do with their interests, then we are technically not being responsive. And that undermines what? Good governance. Equity and inclusiveness. And equity is one of the most serious cardinal principles of good governance. We must provide to people what they deserve. and at the right time. And in doing this, we must make sure that everybody that deserves to get the national cake is given to them. Efficiency and effectiveness. I think this is very clear. We have to be very efficient in the policies we formulate and implement, in the way we govern and respond to the needs of the people, to be able to achieve effectiveness in making the lives of the people better. The rule of law is very important, and in the discourse of political science, it comes in threefold: equality before the law, supremacy of the law, equality before the law, and the respect for fundamental human rights. And all these three components has to come into fruition. The fact that you are a minister of state does not necessarily mean that you are above the Constitution or the institutions of the state. The fact that you are elected a president doesn't mean you are above the laws. Indeed, when the president is sworn in, he swears to uphold and protect the Constitution. And at any point in time that they are unable to do that, then the law must take its course. So equality before the law is very important. Where you have a democracy that some people are more equal than others, then we are moving far away from what? The conditionalities of good governance. Respect for civil liberties is also an aspect of the rule of law, and then supremacy of the law. Participation. Development is largely about participation. Development is for the people. Governance is for the people. It is basically a demand and supply thing. Governments are supposed to supply what the people demand. And if you do not interact and allow the people to participate, how do you know what they want and what they demand? So participation is very important. When you begin to formulate policies and implement without consulting the people, then you have drifted far away from the conditions of good governance. Consensus-oriented. It's not about arrogance. It's about consensus building. We need to jaw. We need to make compromises. That is the name of democracy. When we have democracy and we cannot build consensus on very important, crucial issues of governance, or even a lifeline to governance, including maybe the approval of a budget, then we are moving away from the tenets of good governance. We should be able to reach a consensus, jaw, make compromises, and look at the collective interest rather than the partisan interests. Now, I'm going back to my initial, having looked at these two conceptualizations, I'm going back to my initial typological classifications of development. First, I mentioned good economic growth, and then second, human development. I am going to look at how we fare as a country in these two levels of development. Then I now come to interrogate the relationship that exists between them, and then quickly wrap up. So if you look at the recent projection about economic growth and development, the African continent is doing so well, even though we are one of the poorest continents. So if you look at the recent 2020 African Economic Outlook, 6 of the fastest growing economies were in Africa: Rwanda, Ethiopia, Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, Tanzania, Benin. And then if you also look at the IMF top fastest growing African economies in 2009, you see Libya, Ethiopia, Rwanda, Ghana, Ivory Coast, Senegal, Tanzania, Kenya, Benin, and Uganda. So if you look at almost all the global level portrayal and projections of economic growth, Ghana seems to be doing very well in the rankings and then the projections. So it has scored highly in both the IMF and then the outlook projections. But there are still a lot of issues that remain, and it has to do with the way we manage our resources, our debt ratio, and largely also about the exchange rate and several other things. Where we have come, the projections we have seen in the global media about Ghana's economic performance is not coincidental. It is as a result of collective effort of previous governments since independence up to this date. And this has come in the form of painful concessions that Ghanaians have made in the implementation of the structural adjustment programs, in the analysis and signing to the poverty reduction strategy papers, in the economic recovery programs that we have implemented over the years, in the Washington Consensus policy programs we have accepted and implemented from the World Bank and the IMF, the Bretton Woods institutions largely, the post-Washington Consensus, or what others call the augmented Washington Consensus principles. You are looking at the Millennium Development Goals and the Sustainable Development Goals. So largely at the level of economic fund, we have had checkered past where we do well and kind of tanking rankings, where we do well at some specific regimes, and where we are not able to do well, or we are unable to do well in specific regimes. I'm not going to spend so much time on the economic development because largely I assume it is a means to an end. If you are recording a single-digit inflation and people cannot afford 3 square meals, what is the essence? If you are able to arrest inflation and people can pay school fees, what is the essence? If you are able to have sound microeconomic policies and people can buy things in the market, what is the essence? So largely speaking, development is not just about economic growth. Economic growth is a precondition and a means to achieving the collective end of making the lives of people better. But even using the EG model, the economic development model, Ghana have always faced a lot of challenges, especially in our political business circle. And you see it almost every especially the 2 or 3 years that we've had turnovers. And a very good colleague, Hakim, pointed this clearly. He said that since the inception of democratic rule in 1992, all incumbent governments have tried to manipulate fiscal policy for electoral advantage by increasing public sector wages and salaries, scaling up of infrastructural development, reducing or relaxing their commitment in the collection of taxes, government fees, and charges during election periods. So we usually, even where we are able to manage and grow the economy, when we come to an election year, we deliberately undergrow the economy, simply because we want to win elections. And this often have a lot of macro economic instability, but also the reduction in the economic growth and the economic well-being of the citizenry. But largely, there's also poor enforcement of institutions, that's existing laws. I think Ghanaians have realized this, and our parliament promulgated the Public Financial Management Act in 2016, Act 921, that seeks to regulate even how we spend in times like that. But we have set it aside. You see, there's what we call elite consensus. Institutions only work as long as they serve the interests of the elite. If they do not serve the interests of the elite, they have created in the first place, they'll set it aside. So in the last election that we had, I think we went into the name of COVID, and we decided to set aside Act 921 and then overspend. And whenever we do that, we bear the consequence after elections. And this means that economic development is not just the end, it's a means to an end. Finally, like I mentioned, it's just a means. It doesn't do so much if it doesn't reflect in the lives of the people. So because of this, I'm going to examine the other more important component of development, which is the human development. Human development have been measured. There are a lot of measurement for them because of how varied they are. So the first is what we call the Human Development Index, developed by Amartya Sen and Mahmoud al-Haq, I think around 1994 at the UNDP, to reorient the whole conception of development from largely economic growth to looking at the concerns and the needs of the human being. Then we have the Human Capital Index. It just looks at the extent to which how we invest in education and health translates into our ability to become more productive, skillful people and can contribute to development. Gender Social Norm Index is largely about women. You cannot take women out of the equation. So I remember when Solidare sent out the first flyer, a very good friend of mine, Michael, had to call me and said there's no gender representation. And I said, no, they will work on it. Because you cannot discount women. So the opportunities, the role that we give to women in our development discourse is very crucial. And we measure it in development. Happiness index. So when we do all these things, and at the end of the day, the citizen is not happy, what does that mean? So how we feel, whether we are satisfied or not, whether we are sad or angry, is part of development. And we measure it. World Press Freedom Index. Our journalists, the media, very important protectors of democracy, where they are not partisan and compromised. They can be a very strong force to accountability. So the ability to provide an enabling environment for them to work is very crucial. Human press freedom, so the World Press Freedom Index. And then the last one is the Mo Ibrahim Index. So largely, I'm going to use the Mo Ibrahim Index to look at the performance of Ghana, but largely in the context of the other 10 fastest developing economies that were mentioned by the IMF. I selected them because economically they seem to be doing well in terms of economic growth, but does that translate into what? The welfare and the well-being of their people. Then after that, I'll single out Ghana and look into the details. They always say the devil is in the details, and we see what happens. I'm using the Mo Ibrahim Index simply because it borrows from largely the Human Development Index, but it is more an African pioneered, African-owned initiative, and it seeks to measure some of the most crucial conventions, protocols, treaties that has been ratified at the level of the ECOWAS, at the level of African Union, and at the global scene. So it uses 4 major indicators to measure progress of development in Africa. The first is what we call security and the rule of law. Security and the rule of law have 4 major teams and 21 sub-teams. Foundations for economic opportunity, 4 major teams and 18 sub-teams. Participation, rights, and inclusion, 4 major teams and 19 sub-teams. And then human development, 4 major teams and 21 sub-teams. I've already explained why I'm using the Mo Ibrahim Index. So let's look at security and the rule of law. So if you pick the first 9 countries that the IMF said were doing very well, fastest developed countries in Africa, and you put them to test using the rule of law index of the Mo Ibrahim measurement tool, you see that Senegal scores 68.2 out of 100, Benin 66 out of 0.1 out of 100, Rwanda 66, Ghana 66, Ivory Coast 58.2, Kenya 56, Tanzania. So all these scores are out of 100. So you see that Ethiopia and Libya are actually not doing so well. And I think only about 4 of these countries have been able to cross 60% of that score. So in terms of rankings, Ghana is ranked 11th out of 54 countries. That is a very positive outlook. But if you compare the trend from 2010 to 2019, you see that we have decreased by minus 5.4. So even though we have done well from 2019, if you look at the trend from 2010 to 2019, security and rule of law, we have done very poorly. And when we come to look at specifically the Ghana data and the specific details, you see why this is happening. Then when you put the same countries to test, foundations for economic opportunity, then out of the 100 score, Rwanda is highest, 67, followed by Kenya, Senegal, Ghana, Rwanda, then Uganda, Benin, Tanzania, Ivory Coast, Ethiopia, Libya. And Ghana is also ranked 12 out of 54 countries. That is very good. And you also look at the trend with this very well. From 2010 to 2019, we have been able to appreciate by 6.3%. Then if you look at the participation, rights, and inclusion, Ghana is ranked first. Sorry, not first. First among the 9 countries that has been projected to grow. but 5th in the African rankings out of 52. But also, if you look at the trend from 2010 to 2019, even though we are 5th in Africa, we have decreased in terms of what? Performance, participation, rights inclusion by minus 2.9%. Then if you look at human development, among these countries that has been projected to grow, Rwanda is leading and Ghana is second. So in terms of, so Ghana scores 60.7 out of 100. And in terms of ranking, out of the 54, Ghana is ranked 13th. And if you also look at the trend, we are doing so well, not that well, but very good, plus 2.4% appreciation. So like I said, let's go deeper by just looking at the Ghana data. So when you pick the first measurement, security and rule of law, there are four major sub-teams, security and safety, and we haven't done so well. We have decreased from 2010 to 2019 by minus 5.4, and specifically on the sub-team of security and safety, minus 1.2. Though we have an absence of conflict, it's also negative. What is accounting for, I think the only positive thing we've had, the most positive is what? Absence of criminality using the W standards. But we are not doing well in terms of human trafficking and forced labor. We are not also doing well in terms of absence of violence against civilians. Absence of violence against civilians, we are at the global, 100% ranking, we are 82.3. But if you look at the trend over time, it is minus 4.9. If you look at rule of law and justice, we are going at a decrease of minus 9.9. And that is largely as a result of what? Impartiality of the judicial system. So if you look at the sub-team of impartiality of the judicial system, we have scored 59.6 out of 100. And over the years, from 2010 to 2019, we have progressed by minus 37.5%. But also, if you look at law enforcement, we are not doing well, 50 out of 100. And then over time, that is 2010 to 2009, is minus 12.9%. If you look at accountability and transparency, it is also minus 3.3. We are not doing well generally. And one of the scores, sub-teams we scored low is institutional checks and balances, minus 3.3 across the trend from 2010 to 2019. And then civic checks and balances as well, minus 9.3. And then disclosure of financial and judicial informations, 39.3 out of 100. And then over time, a reduction of minus 4.7. We are doing well in terms of accessibility to information, 50.9%, and then over the time, plus 2.8. Anti-corruption, we are not doing well generally, minus 7.4 reduction. Anti-corruption mechanisms, 52.4 out of 100. And over the years, from 2010 to 2009, is minus 7.4 reduction. Absence of corruption in state institutions, we are ranked 47 out of 100. And then, but there's an improvement over the years, plus 2.9. Absence of corruption in public sector, 44.4 out of 100, but we have had improvement of 0.6%. Public procurement process, 25 out of 100, and over the years, minus 25.0. Absence of corruption in the private sector, 30 out of 100, and over the years, minus 10.4. Then if you go to Foundations for Economic Opportunity, we are doing so well. Overall, score of 60 out of 100, 60.9 out of 100, and then over the period of 2010 to 2009, plus 6.3. So you are looking at public administration, we are doing very well, plus 0.9%. Business environment, we are doing so well, 63.5 out of 100, and plus 5.6 over the 9-year period. Infrastructure, we are doing well, 56.6 out of 100 on the borderline. But over the years, there has been an increment, the 9-year period, of plus 18.1. And rural sector, we are doing very well, 60.9 and plus 0.5. Participation and human rights. Participation, human rights and inclusion is also another sector that we are not doing well, even though we are improving. So if you look at participation, we've scored 77.5 out of 100, and an improvement over the 9-year period of plus 2.2. And that includes freedom of association and assembly, political pluralism, civil society space, which we are not doing so well, democratic elections. Rights, you are looking at personal liberties, a decrease. On rights, there's a decrease of minus 9.5 over the 9-year period. We are looking at media freedom, freedom of expression and belief, digital rights, protection against discrimination. Inclusion and equality, we are doing very well, 68.5 out of 100. And then over the 9-year period of plus 3.5. Gender, we are doing so well, 64.5. But if you look at the 9-year period, we have reduced by minus 7.4. And then human development is also another sector we are doing very well. Overall, 60.7 out of 100. And then the trend of plus 2.4. And it includes health, education, social protection, and sustainable development. Now, press freedom. Using the Press Freedom Index. So, if you look at the best performing countries in terms of press freedom in the 2021 ranking, Ghana came third, and that is very good, 21.33. But Ghana's ranking since 2013 has been very checkered. So if you look at 2012, we were scored 30 out of 180. In 2013, 30 out of 180, so we were static. In 2014, 27 out of 180, so we increased. In 2015, 22 out of 180, an increase. 2016, 26 out of 180, a decrease. 2018, 23 out of 180, an increase. 2019, 27 out of 180, an increase. 2019, 27 out of 180, a decrease. 2020, 30 out of 180, a decrease. And then 2021, 30 out of 180. So we've remained static. Now the happiness index. So after all these things, do Ghanaians feel happy about what's going on? Happiness is an aspiration. We all aspire to be happy. And it is also one of the serious measures of well-being and satisfaction. So if they ask you, were you able to laugh or smile yesterday? A lot of people will answer yes, and most will also answer no. Do you feel worried? Do you enjoy? Are you sad? Are you angry? And all those things. But largely, people may be worried about a lot of things. About household income, about where to get the next meal, about social support systems, about perception of corruption, and about freedom to make life choices. So I have examined the happiness index since the first one was conducted in 2012, and then I have looked at Ghana in terms of its position within Africa and in the world, and whether we are improving or we are regressing. So in 2012, Ghana was scored 11 in Africa, and then 107 in the world. In 2013, we scored 5 in Africa, and then 86 in the world. So it's both positive because we have increased. In 2015, we scored 17 in Africa, and then 94 in the world, which is negative. 2016, we scored 16 in Africa and 124 in the world. So it's positive for Africa. The African rankings, we improved, but in the global rankings, it was negative. In 2017, we scored 25 in the continent and 131 in the world. So it's both negative. In 2018, 11 in the continent and 108 in the world. Both are positive. 2019, 6 in Africa, and then 98 in the world. Both positive. In 2019, 6 in Africa, 98 in the world, both positive. 2026 in Africa, 91 in the world. So it's static, we didn't improve. 2021, 5 in Africa, and 95 in the world. So positive within the continent, but what? Negative at the global level. So now, let's look at the relationship. Having said all this, the relationship between good governance and development is simple, because good governance provides an enabling environment for development to occur. 2, good governance creates responsiveness and commitment to serve the people. But in all these things, I will always ask you, fine, so if I say good governance create the enabling environment for development to occur, is that what we have in this country? Do we have an enabling environment for development to occur? If good governance is about responsiveness and commitment to serve the people, are we being responsive? And are there commitments to serve the interests of the people? If the relationship is about cohesiveness and responsible society, are we building a cohesive and responsible society? If the relationship is about constitutional validity, do we have constitutionally valid government? Do we have a morally legitimate government? If the relationship is about enhancing effective and efficient administration, do we have an effective and efficient administration? If the relationship is about improving quality of life for citizens, are the lives of our citizens improved over the years? If the relationship is about establishing legitimacy and credible institutions, do we have credible and legitimate institutions in this country? If the relationship is about responsive administration, are our governance and administrative systems responsive to the needs of the people? If the relationship is about guaranteeing accountability, do we have accountability in this country? If the relationship is about securing freedom of information and expression, do we have secured freedom and expression in this country? If the relationship is about reducing cost of governance, are we reducing the cost of our governance in this country? If the relationship is about improving quality of public service, do we have improved public services in this country? If the relationship is about productivity of employees, are our employees productive? Are they paid well enough to be productive? If the relationship is about eradicating corruption and establishing credible government, are we able to reduce corruption? Are we even reducing, not to talk of eradicating corruption? And our institutions, are they credible enough? If the relationship is about removing arbitrariness in the exercise of authority, are our authority arbitrary, or they are actually not? Conclusion. Now, I revisit my earlier assumptions that there is a relationship between good governance and development. And that is true. There is a relationship between good governance and development, because good governance actually creates the enabling environment for development to occur. My second assumption was, if it's true, it's also true that good governance is one of the several means, but not the only means to achieving development. The third assumption, are people the means and end of development? Yes. People matter in development. Economic growth, that if it does not translate into enhancing the welfare and the well-being of the people, then it's an incomplete development. Truly, people are the means. That is the human capital, and the end, the beneficiaries of every development. Fourth assumption, it is true that democracy is the closest system of government to good governance. However, democracy does not guarantee development. Indeed, it is astonishing to realize that developments may occur in authoritarian regimes presided by what? Authoritarian governments. Thank you so much for your time and for listening to me. Thank you.
Wow, brilliant submission. Please put your hands together for him one more time. Wow, wow, wow. I mean, the part that for me excites me was the part where he said, it appears that countries that have been practicing authoritarianism appear to be doing much better than those that are practicing democratic systems. That's quite interesting. But anyway, if that's the reality, we have to live with it. Now, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I'll take, so this program has been structured very progressively and strategically. So what we've done is that after the main speaker's presentation, we will go to our able panelists who are seated on my very left, who will also be giving us their feedback on what they make of what Doc has just said. But before that happens, the executive director of the Solidare Governance Forum has a word for the audience. Benjamin Suman, please join us. Please put your hands together for the executive director. In fact, he's a landlord, so he needs to say something.
Yeah, thank you, Moro. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Madam Chairperson, our distinguished main speaker, our venerable panel members, invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, friends from the media. It is with much pleasure that I bring you greetings from the Honorary President of Solidare Ghana, the fellows, and the board members of the Governance Forum to welcome you to this very auspicious occasion where we have gathered in manifestation of our goodwill for our beloved country, Ghana, and in search of that knowledge by which we can together create a sensitive, accountable, responsive, and participatory governance system. We have assembled here as a people who wish to see that one day, and hopefully very soon, our beloved Ghana will be transformed into a world-class society where there is judicious use of our natural resources, our public resources, and a high sense of responsibility and accountability on public officials, where there are good roads across the length and breadth of this country, where there are good schools in every community, and where there are well-equipped and state-of-the-art hospitals in every suburb of Ghana. Ladies and gentlemen, over the period, we have been told by our development partners, and it's been confirmed here by Dr. Ali Seidu, as scholars and governance experts, that we can have that Ghana only when we have agreed to have a stable, uninterrupted, long period of good governance in this country, and that the development we wish for will come about only during that time. So, we have met here to ask, since Dr. Ali Seidu said democracy is an underpinning factor in having good governance and development, we ask, since 1992, that Ghana has traversed the path of democracy, have we developed? These are the nagging questions on our minds for which we have gathered here as a people. We love our country so much, and we think that if we are pursuing this path, then we must see development in our communities and in our lives. If this claim is true, as we often say, Mr. Scholar, that good governance is synonymous to development. This means a country where there are good governance practices, the people prosper and their communities develop. If this claim is so true, then we ask, do all those of us here in Ghana, are we enjoying good governance practices, and have we developed? Are we seeing selfless leadership with genuine burning desire to care for the masses? Are we witnessing judicious application of our public resources on expenditures that are lifting our people from poverty, or expenditures that are meant for the comfort of those in power? When taxes are collected and dissipated on the comfort of the president and those in the legislature and in the judiciary. Is that good governance, Mr. Scholar? These are the nagging questions. And here, we hope the panel members will help us find solutions. Madam Chairperson, ladies and gentlemen, I will not bore you much with talk since the panel members are ready. So I'll hand over the mic after I've said the following. From what we are seeing in Ghana, we think that there's room for improvement. We are not here to condemn, but to ask for improvement. So we would ask questions, and the time will come for the forum will be opened so that those of us here can also ask questions from our scholars as to whether the good governance they spoke about, Madam Chairperson, ladies and gentlemen, it is for this reason that it has become imperative for us to interrogate the symbolic relationship and the symbiotic relationship between good governance and development. Today's lecture and panel discussion is to help us as a country to identify workable solutions that can assist in enriching the quality of governance we are witnessing. And by so doing, help Ghana to enter a new era where we can all declare that our country's governance system is the best among the best, and that we are now rated among Uganda, as Dr. Seydou Alidu said. Ladies and gentlemen, Madam Chairperson, on your behalf and on behalf of Solidare Governance Forum, you are all welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hello? Well, thank you, Benjamin, for that short speech. Now, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, let me also acknowledge the presence of a journalist, philanthropist, Deputy Director of Communications for the National Democratic Congress, Obobia Dakwopoko. She's with us here. Obobia, thank you very much for joining us. Now, we will be taking some feedback from our well-lined up, abled, more than capable scholars who will be giving us their feedback on Dr. Alidu Seydou's very, very brilliant and powerful presentation on good governance and its impact on national development. But you, the audience, as the executive director also mentioned, will get the opportunity to ask your questions because it's extremely important. I'm sure that's why you're here. As for me, I have about 20. Oh, plenty. I have plenty questions for Doc. But it's not about me, so if I'm given the opportunity, I'll ask those questions. Maybe I need to reintroduce the very strong panel that we have today. So Professor Nino is with us here. Prof, thank you very much for joining us. He is the head department of soil science, University of Ghana, fellow of Solidare Governance Forum. Professor Ransford Jampo, now please when I mention your name, just give us a wave and that should be fine. Professor Ransford Jampo is an associate professor of political science, director, Center for European Studies, University of Ghana, 14 years of teaching and research experience. So you can imagine. He is also the UTAC secretary, University of Ghana chapter. Dr. Grace Ayunsu, unfortunately, has not been able to join us yet. Does anybody know whether she's on her way? If she's not, we can assume that she won't be able to make it. But she was actually supposed to be with us, but she's not here. Mr. Michael Abbey is also with us. He's the program coordinator, the Frederick Ebert Foundation, responsible for democratic processes, political parties, training, gender justice, and security. Please give us a wave. Thank you very much. Mr. Mensah Thompson is also with us here. Proud recipient, 2021 award for his advocacy, and the executive director, ASEPA Ghana. And the last, but obviously not the least, Mr. Geoffrey Okanse. Sorry about that, Geoffrey Okanse. He is a social advocate, development communicator, political observer, fellow African Education Watch. Now, I need to also remind you that this program or event is live on Wizard TV and XYZ TV. So, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to give the mic to, which of you would like to start with the feedback, by giving us the feedback? Or okay, so yes, please. Oh, so first of all, join me here. Join me here. Please, please do. Yes. I guess we're set. Now, whilst we're getting ready to hear from our scholars, those of you who are home watching us either from your office or wherever you find yourself, if you have any questions or contributions or comments that you want to make on the program, please send your message. Send your WhatsApp message to 0207 200 Please don't call, just send a message. 0207 200 111. We will read your questions live here. So maybe let me start from my immediate left. Mr. Mensah Thompson would give us a quick feedback on what Dr. Ali Desado has said, and then we'll go in that order. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I wish it didn't start from me. But just a few things that I noted down. I think it's important that I point it out. I was following the presentation very closely, and as a public accountability activist, there were very vital points in the presentation that really caught my attention, and I cannot do without touching on them. I think the issues of accountability are very important. The issues of transparency, the issues of equity and inclusiveness are also very, very much important. And the issue of responsiveness, the issues of suppression of freedoms of citizens, as all indicated under one aspect of the qualities of good governance, were some of the things that really caught my attention. And I'd like to focus. I think it's important that we make this reference, that since 2010, one important aspect of our democratic process, which is the public perception in the judiciary, keeps going down. And as stated in the presentation, if I got the figures right, our judiciary Doc, you help me with the term. What's the judiciary? Yes, I want to get the term right. Impartiality of the judiciary, right? Very low, right? 37.5. We had minus. We had moved from 59, right, to minus 37.5. I think that is very profound. And this data points clearly to a number of things we're witnessing in the judiciary today. And I have said time without number that you cannot manage the judiciary without managing public perception about the judiciary. And we seem to see events that are constantly reducing the perception, the public confidence in the judiciary. Now, if we have moved from about 59% to about 37% confidence in the judiciary, I think that should scare anybody, because this is an integral aspect of a democratic regime, independence of the judiciary. And for me, if we keep on having this trend, then it means that we are moving away from a democracy to, some form of dictatorship. But at least Doc have also told us that it is not automatic that democracy will lead to good governance. Dictatorship, authoritarian regimes could also lead to development. We have the Singaporean example. We even have a classical example in Africa here, in Rwanda, where we seem to have, partial authoritarian regimes that are also doing well. But Ghana has subscribed to a type of democracy. And if you read Article 34 of our Constitution, the directive principle of state policy, it is very clear on the aspirations of this country. So it talks about fairness, realization of basic human rights, a healthy economy, the right to work, the right to good health, the right to education. These are things that form the tenets of the democracy that we have, the rights, the freedoms, as enshrined in Chapter 12 of our Constitution. And so all these things are things that should inform the basis of, I think, the analysis that we are making. And if you ask me, I will not risk for an authoritarian regime in this country, even though we've had experience in military interventions which led to some development but had its own excesses. And so I would rather opt for us to rather, instill more and more work into protecting the democracy that we have, look at the democratic variables, the ones that are waning away. How do we ensure that we revive the ones that are waning away? How do we ensure that we keep on doing the little work that we can in our own little corner as citizens? Participation is very important, citizen participation in our democracy. We don't leave everything for the politicians to do. We all also partake as civil actors, members of civil society, as the media. We all play our own little role to ensure that we get to that, standard democracy that we have, the aspirations which the framers of our Constitution opted for us.
All right. Mensah Thompson, thank you very much. Now, these are just initial comments that will be made by our resource persons, because there'll be more time for them to give something more extensive. So I guess Professor Jampo would like to also say a word or two before we come back to him.
Well, thank you. I think Dr. Seydou Alidu, congratulations. I mean, this is an excellent presentation. And, I know you, I knew you were going to deliver, and so I am not surprised. It's an excellent presentation. Basically, he tried to see whether there is a linkage between good governance and development. And he argued that it is within a democratic state that good governance can, the ideals of good governance can be realized. And if you look at the features of good governance as he outlined, you can see that it is within a democracy that the features of good governance can be identified. And so I find it difficult to understand why at some point in time he wanted to say that sometimes dictatorships can also lead to some form of development, because within dictatorships it becomes difficult for you to realize the ideals of good governance. You're talking about consensus building. Dictators don't care about building consensus.
So not even benevolent dictators?
Well, benevolent dictators wouldn't care about consensus. They would not care about human rights. There are certain features that you identify that I find those difficult to be associated under dictatorship. Generally, because you said we would come back. I mean, I have so many things to say about this, and I wish it were a question and answer series. But allow me, if you look at the features of good governance as he outlined, I mean, if you want to go back to look at them one after the other, you would appreciate that if these features are really present in a democratic country, then that country cannot afford not to develop. Look at them one after the other. And so in my view, it is our inability to really put ourselves, or our inability to commit ourselves to the proper implementation of these features that undermines our quest. Wait, please, wait. That undermines our quest to bring about development. He talks about participation. Participation key. Now, if you talk about participation, you are not saying that all the 30 million Ghanaians should be part of decision making. Apart from election, even election, not all of us participate. But in the theory, if you're talking about participation, you are talking about involving the people on matters that directly affect them. So that if you are going to decide for teachers, you involve teachers. If you are going to take a decision for constituents, directly in situating where the KVIP should be, you have to involve them. Okay, beyond that, there is also group participation that are supposed to ensure that, see, he who is cutting a path would not know that his back is crooked. And so you need groups, civil society, media, to also play a certain role within the state, just to ensure that as you may be drifting or you may be derailing, they would bring you, on the reel. But you would agree with me that civil society participation now is going low. They will tell you they don't have money. Some too have been, are partisan, or some too have deliberately been tagged as partisan, and so they are not functioning well. And then you look at the media. Okay, the media is supposed to participate very well by shaping discourse and by ensuring that governments are kept on their toes. But for some time now, I can see a certain posture that creates an impression as if, it creates an impression typical of cutting the head of a snake and leaving the rest of the body to remain mere ropes. You see, there is this scholar, American political scientist called John Dryzek. He identified two forms of participation. He calls one participation within the state and participation within the polity. Now, he says there is participation within the polity if you allow civil society leaders, group leaders, media leaders to continue to remain, to mobilize their people, to keep government on their toes and to do all the activism. Leave them to do whatever they want to do and respect what they do. But there is participation within the state when politicians cleverly would go and appoint the heads of these bodies. Okay, so you're cutting the head of the snake. So you appoint the heads of these bodies into your fold. And deliberately, you would give them a certain appointment that you know that when they hold that appointment, they cannot be influential. So it creates an impression that we've appointed you, but even where you've been appointed to, you are not influential, thereby depriving the parent group the role, the organizational skills, the mobilization skills of the leader. So if you belong to one CSO or you belong to one media house and you used to take the government on, now that you've been appointed, the rest of the body becomes like a rope. And then they take you there. They said you are going to contribute to shape national development. But they take you there, but they give you a certain position that you know. Now, you can't influence anything, so they make you a board member. Okay? What can one board member do to influence the entire activity of a board? So, it is key. If we want to we want to ensure that good governance brings about development. This is just one example. And Dreiser calls this practice co-optation. They will bring you to their fold and make sure that you don't function to influence anything. But at the same time, they've deprived your group of you. And if you do some of these things, then we can tout our credentials as a country that is democratic and so that believes in the dogmas of good governance. But it becomes difficult for us to reap the ideals of good governance, i.e. development. We can't have development. So this is just one example. I can interrogate all the features, and you know that in all the features of good governance, we are scoring, our score is 30%, 20% consensus building. We don't build consensus. When you talk about consensus, you see, there's difference between having power and throwing your weight about, and then having parity of power. Now, if power is at par, leadership, a certain caliber of leadership will be needed to build consensus. I'm talking about parliament. Yep. Okay? The caliber of leaders in parliament now are not the types of leaders who can build consensus. And it is simple. You don't need hawks leading political parties in the quest to build consensus. It will not work. I don't understand why they don't understand. But you see, I don't want to turn this into a second lecture. So we'll go on. We'll come in.
Wow, that's interesting. That's interesting. But before our next speaker takes the floor, I think Prof has started on a note that makes the discussion even more interesting, because he says, if indeed we know what the features and the principles of good governance are, and yet we are struggling to commit to the tenets of these principles, then something must be missing. And that's what we need to identify. Because I believe that if we're able to identify where we're struggling to adhere to the tenets of these principles, we'll be making some progress. So our next caller, Mike, you're on the floor.
Right. Thank you very much, Moro. And thank you, Doc, for that erudite presentation. Indeed, Doc is my former lecturer, including Professor Jampo as well at the Political Science Department. Of course, and us coming from a development-oriented organization and in charge of other working lines, including gender justice, I must say that I'm particularly not comfortable that Grace couldn't join us on the panel for us to have this discussion. Indeed, what we are talking about is a broad area that touches on every score in our economic life and affects every demography: women, men, young people, children, and what have you. And so sometimes it is good that we listen, we also hear their perspective on these matters. Very, very important. Good, so let me perhaps take us back to the topic for this very engagement. Of course, I have some points of convergence with the speaker's presentation. So I believe we all agree that democracy or governance is a process. And again, we also agree that development is an outcome. So what it means is that you ride on democratic governance to bring about development. It's like a journey, and so you know where you are headed. And so it is very important that as a country, we know what our development is, the type of development we seek to aspire. Very important. And this country came close to that when we implemented a long-term development plan, which actually gives a visual imagination of where we would want to be as a country. But it appears we all know what is happening with the long-term development plan. And again, with development as well, apart from knowing the substantive issues, what you would want to achieve by way of development, I believe the process also matters as to whether you would want a snail-paced development or you would want a fast-paced development. Indeed, if you would want a snail-paced development, that would also influence the kind of governance architecture you basically adopt. And so, with the current governance architecture we have as a country, no doubt we are going to be seeing some form of development, but it may be at a snail-paced development. Development is basically the improvement in the lives of people. But if you would want a rapid-paced development, then perhaps you may want to rethink your governance architecture, your governance model. And this may lead to the issue you raised. So we are talking about good governance. We are talking about democracy. Indeed, these concepts are neoliberal Western concepts. When you invite Peter Eke, a Nigerian scholar, he would talk about the two publics, that we seem to have a conflicting architecture or processes of running our governance as a continent. And so when you look at how colonialism established its institutions, and even our own traditional chieftaincy institutions, they've, over time, formed some protocols and norms of governance. And again, if you're inviting the Western neoliberal concept of good governance, then there is a conflict. And so you need to, first of all, define your governance architecture, your governance vehicle. So with the conflict we are having, so you talk about, for instance, accountability. Doc mentioned that. Yes, we all know that the colonial masters were never accountable to their subjects. Indeed, it is just recently that the courts in Ghana made pronouncement that chiefs can be accountable or should be accountable to their subjects by way of letting the people know how they use community properties and what have you. So even within that institution, matters of accountability zilch. And this is how we've lived over time. And we are talking about good governance, a Western concept, marrying the way we used to live or what we've been used to. So we need to, first of all, reconstruct this governance vehicle we've adopted for ourselves. And indeed, you all bear me out, that this 4-year term experience is not taking us anywhere. We need to have the hard discussions, I'm sorry. A government comes in, within 4 years, first year, second year, you are thinking of forming your government. Third year, you want to engage in some developmental project. Third year, you're thinking about the next government, the next elections. So you hardly have time to really think about development. But it is okay if you want a snail-paced development, because this current architecture would give you a snail-paced development. Again, the issue, and of course, Doc touched on the culture of silence, electoral stealing, human rights issues, as of course, things that we need to look out for in a democratic environment. But it is also very important for us to note that you need a Democrat in a democracy. So you can say you're practicing democracy, but if you don't have Democrats in a democracy, you're bound to be having these issues, culture of silence, blah, 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 blah. So in rethinking your governance architecture, how do we ensure that young leaders behave as Democrats? How do we ensure that our political leaders behave and think as Democrats? In that way, they understand that I need not to shut down radio stations, television stations for over a year or two without even thinking about the fact that media houses are there to help enrich our democracy. Indeed, if a media house has breached the rules of engagement, a Democrat would understand that, listen, the media is necessary for our democratic evolution. And for that matter, how do we apply sanctions such that we still met our sanctions, but we still protect them so they can still continue enriching our democracy? But it is when you don't have a Democrat that these issues will not even come to mind. So we also talked about our institutions, for instance. And these, for me, are the points of contact, because we come into contact with our public institutions every day. What is the orientation of our public institutions, for instance? And there is a very worrying trend, which I've observed. I keep saying it, but some think it's one of those things. We have politicians today that have taken up the role of the state. The state is supposed to, through public institutions, be providing social services. Now you have politicians doing that in their various constituencies. It may appear good that a politician is paying school fees for over 1,000 constituents. First of all, indirectly mounting pressure on MPs and helping the state to renege on its responsibility to the ordinary citizen. Where you need to use your oversight power, a member of parliament, to ensure that state institutions rather work to provide these social services to the citizenry, you rather step in the fold of the state. It will get to a time where there will be no state. And that will be very, very dangerous for our democracy. I rest here for our subsequent engagement. Thank you.
Wow. Well, Mr. Okansi.
Yes, I'll do my best.
My earlier panel decided not to listen to me, so they spoke for 1 hour.
Unfortunately,
I know you asked for you are my friend, so you do 5 minutes.
Let me disappoint you today. let me disappoint you today when you give me the chance. I will start with a statement I made here some few months ago. I will repeat it today, and let's think about it. I say good governance is good and bad governance is good. Bad governance benefits a few greedy ones, and they are happy every day. So don't be surprised you see people defending every rot on air. That is the benefits of bad governance to them. Now, good governance is good, and then tell you why good governance is good. It's good because even in the end, it benefits those who perpetrate the crimes and steal from us. So that is why we have to hold on to good governance. It is the best and only way. And so you've heard all the wonderful definitions for good governance. Now let me entrench it with the benefits it will bring to you. It helps to become more stable and productive. It will unlock new opportunities. It will also reduce risks and also enable fast and safe growth. It also improves reputation and fosters trust, mass ownership, and guarantees sustainable gains. Ghana, I tell you today, and I'll repeat any day, go and bring the best economists in the world. Ghana is not a poor country. We are a poorly managed country. And I repeat, we are not a poor country. We are a poorly managed country. You cannot have all the timber, all the gold, and yet you are also discovering in OT some mineral resources, and then come back and sit here and decide to accept that you are a poor country. You are not a poor country. You are a poorly managed country. And then, let me ask you about time. How do we manage time? We decided to start this program at 10. Were we before time? Were we on time? Or we were behind time? If you are able to answer this question, that is why we are where we are economically. When you started behind time, Ghana would always be behind time. I met Mr. Suman in the hall when I arrived at 9 o'clock. He was on time. There are reasons you want to give for reasons why you are late. Keep those reasons. Put them together. Let's still discuss it. Are we on time or will always be behind time? Let's move to the next one. There is a direct correlation between our governance and our development. A direct one. And let me tell you what. Since independence, I want to put it to you today. that to date we have governed ourselves by us and from within. We have lost and gained. We, and I repeat, we, but some of us have set the agenda and implemented, yes, by some, and it has affected everybody else. Some positive and others negative. As I speak with you, there is a man who is a Ghanaian by tag and name, sitting somewhere you don't know, I don't know, has never been affected by the goods. As poor as the person is, even what we distributed under COVID, the free water and electricity, the person didn't get. And that person would never get it. Yet they are not complaining. In this country, who must cry is not crying. And that's why this country is where we are. I put it to the 3 pillars, the wonderful presentations. The citizens, that's our human capital. How have we governed it? The next one is our environment, the natural resources that God gave us. You didn't create it, I didn't bring it here. The water bodies were there. There was gold, there was diamond, there was everything else. How have we governed it well? The final thing is our security, our borders. And when I say security, I'm not talking about guns and bullets. Our food safety, water safety, the land, shelter, and health. What have we done to it? Now, when you want to talk and answer these ones, I'll move to the governance sectors. Education. Quickly, let's talk about our curriculum. Have we connected our curriculum to our industry? And for that matter, connected that industry to our raw materials? When you finish answering, you know whether we've managed our education systems very well. What about personal training, professionals? In the sub-region alone, we are surrounded by 4 Francophone countries. Let's do an exchange. If we were taking 1,000 of our students outside, we would take 250 to each country to make up the 1,000 number. If they were bringing to Ghana, we were getting 4,000 students to help them in translating from French to English. We would have had an advantage. How well have we taken advantage of all that to train these people and make money? When they tell you that when you invest in education, you don't get money back, it's not true. If you properly manage your systems, the universities can make money from their IGFs. They can make money, and they make monies if they want to. Now, when you move strictly to the issue of corruption in education, even the monies that we have taken there that we are complaining, go and investigate Get Fund, and you see the wanton wastage. You will get there. Go to the extractives. When you get to the extractives, you look at the exemptions we are granting. The wanton exemptions we grant in the extractive sector is something else to talk about. You talk about skills training. Do we have the requisite skills to play a part? Local participation. When you go to the extractive center, are Ghanaians in there? How many Ghanaians are in there?
Okay.
And then finally, I'll go to our break. Can you just allow me just 3 minutes? Let me go to our break.
Okanzi.
Let me just wrap up.
Just 2 minutes.
Just wrap up.
Yes, thank you.
And then you come to economic governance. Our debt profile. We are borrowing. Nobody is saying don't borrow. When you borrow, where do you invest the money? Are the monies that we have borrowed being invested in the areas that will get our returns? Exemptions again, poor targeting of our projects, and then finally corruption. On issues of corruption, in the Auditor General's report, we have lost 12 billion Ghana cedis. Yet we sit and shout and fight over e-levy, which will bring us less than 10 billion. What are we talking about? I think when we are further discussing, there are a lot of them on my paper we can discuss. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, Mr. Jeffrey Okansi, interesting submission. Professor Nino Dewona.
Thank you very much. Let me correct something. I'm not the head of Department of Soil Science. I'm a retired lecturer.
Oh.
So
okay, sir. Okay, sir.
Before the Vice Chancellor queries me for being here when I should be in the office.
We take full responsibility, sir.
I think I also have to add my commendation to the main speaker, Dr. Seidu. If you were or you are a student, I think you have gotten good notes. And I will have marked areas which will get me some tips.
Prof, can you please get a bit closer to the mic so that we can hear you?
Can you hear me?
Yes. So that's
I
more
said
audible.
if you were a student, you will have gotten lots of areas to answer questions in these exams at the end of the semester. And I took copious notes.
I think we've summarized his presentation by way of the assumptions he set, then the relationship between good governance and development. And then he indicated that human or the people are the good indicator of development. So when you look at our people and there is development, I don't think you need to define it. They will tell you it will be expressed in diverse ways. Then the whole centerpiece of his presentation was on the 8 principles that the United Nations set in 2009. And it was the United Nations Economic Commission for Asia and the Pacific. And apparently it was due to the success story of the 70s, 80s, and 90s of what we call the Asian Tigers. Singapore, Indonesia, Malaysia, quite apart from Japan, and then China. And especially Indonesia, where President Sukarno, who was the first president, and then succeeded by Suharto, the Independence National Party, ran the country for over 45 years. And then for Singapore, Lee Kuan Yew, who was the prime minister at the time of independence in 1957 until he retired in 1990, and then stayed in cabinet till 2004. That long spell sustained political leadership. And of course, we all know of Dr. Mahathir Mohamad of Malaysia. Anwar Sharif is now in after shared leadership. And you ask yourself all the 8 principles, and he went on to give what I call very interesting Human Development Index. And what made me happy is the happiness index. And I can tell you, Dr. Seydu, I've never been happy because I lost my investment due to a sound advice from a financial expert that you diversify your investment in Gold Coast Securities, Midlands, etc. I wouldn't like to go into that. And the reason why I'm not happy is captured by some of the issues that you raised with respect to the 8 principles. That we spent 21 billion Ghana cedis to restructure a 9 billion indebted financial sector. And then Act 918, the Bank of Ghana Act, go in there and read. The governor, the first deputy governor, the second deputy governor are members of the board of directors or board of governors of the Bank of Ghana, and the governor is the chairperson. And go through the act and see the functions of the Bank of Ghana in respect of regulating financial operations in the system. Then you ask yourself that you have an elected government, and they told us that these financial institutions had to be held restrained because they did not act well. But then the same regulations or the act tells us how these individual financial institutions should operate with board of directors, their roles and functions. Of course, they are paid remuneration. And somehow, Dr. Seydu, I'm not happy because I lost my investment forever. For my health, I will not say I will not be happy again, so I'm not happy. But seriously, where are all the directors of these institutions? They are supposed to present their audited accounts and governance, and the Bank of Ghana as a lasting institution. What did he do? In our inaugural lecture, this Solidare, I had opportunity to make an intervention, and I reiterated my often rhetorical question that the constitution that we have, is it correct? And the practitioners are not correct? or the constitution is not correct and the practitioners are correct, or the constitution is not correct and the practitioners are not correct. Because when you look at all the principles and the legislations, if you count, we are now having over 960 acts of parliament. That tells you about the number of laws that have been passed, quite apart from ordinances, executive instruments, legislative instruments, etc. So, and then we have a constitution, the supreme law. And so why are we where we are? These are the questions. And my colleague raised an issue. Let's forget about the nice, maybe university dawn presentation and come down to basics. And that's what I was doing when the lecture was going on. Do we have a national development agenda for this country? You're talking about 4 years. The US has 4 years. Some presidents have said 4 years. When Obama visited the country in 2009, July, he said, what makes a country is strong institutions. Do we have strong institutions? And if the Constitution, as I'm saying, whether it's correct or not, the US, go and check, has 9 justices of the Supreme Court. Finished. They are there for life. And you are a president and one retires or dies, you retire voluntarily. You are fortunate to have that privilege to appoint somebody. More so when it's a chief justice. And it's not that they are going to do your bidding, but their ideological or philosophical orientation is so important. If somebody who is conservative, he will tilt opinion when issues come before the Supreme Court. Somebody who is liberal. Here we are, we have a constitution that has a limitless number of justices of the Supreme Court. And basically, what do they do? We say the Supreme Court has the sole responsibility to interpret the Constitution, or perhaps matters that are brought up from the lower courts or relatively lower courts for further adjudication. But that's the Constitution that we have. So a president can appoint so much. We have a Constitution that says that when you have a census 10 years and your population increases, you can create districts. And there's a formula or another legal obligation that when a district breaks a constituency, then you create 2 constituencies, because a constituency cannot straddle into 2 districts. So we heard of the Sal people, North, Hohoe North. The northern of Hohoe North went into another region. So they could vote, because in presidential election is one national constituency. But parliamentary, they could not, because that section now did not belong to the original Hohoe North. Then the question was, when regions were created and people demarcated, didn't they know? So that brings the question that, are the people correct and the Constitution is not correct? So we ask ourselves so many issues. Then let's come to another often sing-song of mine. Let's all ask ourselves candidly, are we doing business? Is our business environment good for doing business? Go through the statistics. They tell us that agriculture contributes only 18.24% to GDP. Industry, 34.69%, and the service sector, 42.63%. And the source is Statista 2021. And manufacturing, the highest was the first quarter of 2021, in the last 20 years, $1.1 billion. That is all that manufacturing contributes to our GDP. And the service sector, talking here, everything, that is giving here so much, we don't even produce the materials that go into the sector here. I also have a sing-song. These days we don't smoke, but in the past when smokers didn't use lighter, they had a small box, matchbox. 10 of those packed at Medina Market is 2 cedis. So if you disaggregate into the small box, it's 20 pesos. Manufactured in Malaysia, high seas, freight. Ken Ofurata takes his tax. Then first, second, third distribution, and the ground floor at Medina, the last retail is 2 cedis. And yet we buy, because we light so many times we turn our stove on. Can we produce matches here and sell it at 2 cedis? This is something we consume. Our economy is a trading economy. From when you go to buy smoked fish, they tell you this is Abidjan. So we say, oh, so this is Abidjan mackerel or Abidjan salmon. We have rice fields, and not that we didn't do that here. We did that here in the 70s. Rice, for 120 days, rice is on the table. And yet we spend over $500 million to import rice. We bring tomatoes from Nigeria, Kaduna, onions. We bring tomatoes from Burkina. Go through the cocoa marketing company freight cost. And it costs 31 pounds to transport 1 ton of cocoa from Tema to UK. And $94 US, 1 ton from Tema to the US. And it is about 300 Ghana cedis by the exchange rate. Ask anybody selling coconut, when he plucks coconut at your house, the Aboso Kai Macho or the Aboboya will charge 1 cedi per fruit to send it from maybe Adenta to come and crack at Legon Junction. So if you cut 1 ton of cocoa, that's 10 of the 100 kilogram bags from Seshuyo also to Kakrade, do you think you pay 300 cedis? It will be more than that. So it means that it's cheaper to transport cocoa 1 ton from Tema to UK than to transport cocoa from Seshuyo also to Takrade. So your 1 million metric tons of cocoa you produce, you only spend $300 million 300 million Ghana cedis, or 31 million pounds to transport it to UK. And you will spend over 5 times that amount to transport it from Seshuyo also to Tema. And this is a country that you go and beg for COVID.
Okay.
You go and beg for 1 kilometer road. So all of us, this economy is an economy we can all manage. And so these are the factors. And so when you put all the issues on the principles, accountability, look at the Public Procurement Act 663 of 2003, amended 2016. And if you are in management of a public subvented organization, and you look at price quotation of something you can buy at Hisense, a tabletop, and suppliers come and quote, and you see what they quote when they don't manufacture, and yet we spend our resources to procure these items. The cost of doing business. And so, colleagues, I think it is easy to blame a government. If you talk to President Nana Akufo-Addo today, he will tell you he's doing his best. And if you talk to President Mahama, he will tell you he did his best. If you resurrect President Rawlings, he will tell you he did his best. So is President Mills, etc. But going forward, the issues that really affect our underdevelopment are still there. Today, we transport cargo within the country by the most expensive means. Even the colonial railway track, we don't have a railway line that services Tema Harbor. So you see the cargo trucks that will be heading towards Kumasi and then up country.
Okay.
The way we do things, constitutionally, economically, and it's as if we are less and less live. In my language in Ghana, we say, Ajoma Wayo. Let's live just like that. If you really, we don't examine this to place greater demands on governance.
Okay.
No matter what we do,
okay,
we'll come back here next year and it's the same old ball game.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much. So, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we intend to leave here the next 30 minutes. Abi? Ben? So we would give the audience the opportunity to also ask your questions. But before I do that, I have a few acknowledgements I need to make very quickly. Nee John Coleman is with us here. He's a security expert. Nee, please give us a wave if you're here. Thank you very much for being with us. Ruth Sedor, Deputy National Youth Organizer of the NDC. Ruth, thank you very much for joining us. Titi Kateno, he is a member, National Communications of the NDC. Titi, please give us a wave. Yes, Titi Kateno, he's with us here. Dr. Aaron Atta Alasani, I hope I got the pronunciation of your name correctly. Dr. Aaron Atta Alasani is also with us here. Doc, please give us a wave. Thank you very much for joining us. Doc, are you still here? I'm not sure about that. Well, we also have Abbas Mohammed, former DCE, Bimbila. Abbas, thank you. Alaji, thanks for joining us. Now, like I said, the audience will have an opportunity to ask questions. It could be directed towards Dr. Ali Dusedu or any of the panel members upstage. But with the permission of the chairperson and the audience, can I ask at least 2 questions? Can I please ask? Can I? Oh, it doesn't look like you guys are happy I want to ask questions. Okay, it looks like you now want me to. Okay, so I have 2 fundamental questions I need to ask. Now, Prof, I noticed when Abe was speaking, or when he was talking, when he mentioned that, look, depending on the type of development we want, whether slow pace or fast pace, we will have to re-examine our democratic system or the model or the governance architecture that we have. You don't seem to agree. I notice you're nodding in disagreement. So I'll give the opportunity to tell us why you think it's not the way to go. That's my first question to you. My second question is, Doc, I've also heard people say maybe we're being too hard on ourselves. This whole animal called democracy, and sorry, I mean, no pun intended, this thing we call democracy, we are comparing ourselves to the more advanced countries, so America, Germany, the UK, etc., etc. They have been practicing this for years. I mean, we're talking decades, in some cases centuries. So maybe it is nascent, it is evolving, gradually we'll get there. And that we do not expect a democracy that just started in 1992, and I'm talking about Fourth Republican democracy, where we have the 1992 Constitution, to evolve over a short period of time. So that's my question to you as well. I have many other questions, but maybe let me just restrict myself to the 2. And then when the audience, so Prof, you will respond, and then the audience will come in. Prof,
well, thank you. If you look at the various definitions that he gave, and you synthesize all of them, you would come to a certain definition which, if we all understand, we would appreciate that that definition of good governance would never stall or reduce the pace of development. You see, from what I deduced from all he said, good governance then can be explained in terms of the efficient and effective management of scarce resources, such that it translates into developmental outcomes that can tangibly be reflected in the lives of the people. Right. So you are talking about effectiveness in doing everything. You know how to do it, and you do it well. That is effectiveness. Right. So how if people are effective in governing, if people are effective in doing the kinds of things that they have been entrusted, given the responsibility to do, how does that slow development?
Because he says, no, you see, Prof, he's saying that. You see, he's not saying that effectiveness and efficiency are not important. What he's saying is that we have an architecture that makes it difficult for people to be as effective and efficient as they are supposed to be. No, and I can simplify it if you don't mind, but I hope you get the drift.
No, simplify. Okay,
so you, Prof, you have written articles, for instance, where you have criticized the excessive and extensive powers given to the president, the executive president, okay? And how the executive president, and how this system sort of breeds what you call clientelism. The president appoints everybody, okay? Now, when people are appointed, they are appointed based on their party affiliation. Now, when somebody is appointed based on their party affiliation, I mean, you get a drift.
No, I get you.
So that's why he's saying that there's a problem with architecture. Until we look at it, we're not going to make any progress.
But you see, I'm a teacher.
Yes.
Okay, so I grade scripts and I mark exam based on marking scheme. Okay.
Right.
There is, if you look at the presentation that my colleague presented, it has a focus. It's talking about good governance and development.
Yes.
Okay. And good governance has certain features. Okay, so I am examining, I shook my head, okay, examining what has been presented and the conclusion that are likely to be drawn. Okay, so I felt that, if you are going on this tangent, then it means you are going away from the key focus of what has been presented. I'm saying that if you look at the features, I was looking at the definition, but I was just looking at them one after the other. Effective management of resources. And when we say somebody is effective, you know what it means. Mm-hmm. Okay, so many people have been appointed to positions that doing whatever they do, they are not effective.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And efficient management of such resources.
Okay.
Efficiency, the idea connotes using little to achieve more.
Right.
Okay. Do we use little to achieve more?
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
And you are managing scarce resources.
Right.
Okay. And your management and doing all these things should be such that they translate into developmental outcomes that can tangibly be reflected in the pockets or lives of the people. We are not talking about those outcomes that are touted on the floor of parliament. Mm. We are talking about those outcomes that the people themselves can attest to. Mm. You understand? So if we stick by this definition alone, we cannot be talking about slow-paced development. Right. And then look at all the 9 or 8 features that have been identified. If we are going to accomplish all of them, then they would not stall or slow any process.
I understand what you're saying, Prof, but you see, maybe.
So let's not go outside the question.
No,
if you go outside the question to bring in other things, then it makes the grading difficult. So
audience,
this man,
please,
I would have failed him if you were writing my exam.
Please bear with me.
His question and then he's providing
Please
answers.
bear with me. You know, sometimes as broadcasters, we tend to forget we're MC, so we think we're on radio or we're on TV. Because I have very fundamental questions I need to ask about some of the submissions Prof has made, but I'm not going to do that because I don't want to belabor the point. We don't have all the time. So I'll bring in Abby, and then the audience can come in and ask their question. Abby, I beg you, 2 minutes.
Thank you very much.
Doc, you come in. Doc, I beg you. Just 2 minutes, I beg you.
Thank you very much, Maro. Let me begin by saying that it is actually the case that Prof's submission corroborates my position.
Uh-huh.
You see, so if you're saying the system is not effective,
right,
the system is not efficient,
right,
that has its kind of results it produces.
Exactly.
So if you want a good result, you must rethink the system,
right,
the architecture,
right,
the model,
right.
Let me give a specific example.
Let me tell you. Okay, sorry.
Which you touched on.
Abby, let me tell you. Sorry. Just 1 second. Let me tell you where the two of you differ. So, Prof is looking at what has been presented, as in what we all see. Okay? So his submissions are based strictly and squarely on this. But you are situating the presentation within the context of Ghana. Do you get it? So that's what no, I'm saying that's where the two of you differ. But essentially, you're all speaking the same language. So because of that, I'll allow you to talk again.
No.
You're saying the same thing.
On participation. And
you're saying
disagreements are good in this environment, so allow us.
No, you're a big man. You're a big man, so you relax.
You touched on participation. Doc equally touched on same.
Right.
Now, we live in a country where when you observe participation today, it is largely based on which political party or group you are affiliated to.
Right.
And I think that in itself defines citizens in classes. And when you look at political party A in government and you observe political party B, largely you see members of the political party B in opposition just waiting for their turn after 8 years. Then they know they'll also have access to economic opportunities. They'll be invited to be part of decision-making processes. And all these actually touch on participation.
Okay.
So I am saying that this current system we are practicing, we need to rethink the architecture in order to produce the desired result we all seek to see in this country.
That's fine. It's a fair point, but it doesn't address most of the things that Dr. Lidu has said. So, Doc, I had a question for you. Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you so much. I agree to some extent with Prof. Jampo's submission on one of the conclusions or assumptions that are made. If you read widely the literature, there is inconclusive relationship between democracy, which is usually seen to be the benchmark of good governance, and development. Now, if you read the work of Professor Robert Hunter Wade, he has a fantastic book called Governing the Markets, Industrial Policy in Southeast Asia. And he talks about how the so-called Asian tigers developed. It wasn't on democratic principles, right? If you look at maybe to some extent China, people think China is not so democratic, maybe compared to the US and other things. But look at the Chinese economy. Look at Rwanda. Look at Ethiopia. Those countries, when you put them on the scale of democracy and good governance, they may falter, but their economies are doing well, they are developing. Now, there is something we call relativity. The fact that you are an autocratic regime doesn't mean that you do not have some of the features of good governance. But relatively, they are not as pronounced or as manifest as it will be in a completely democratic system. Do you understand? So maybe in Rwanda, there may be participation, but not to the extent that it is done in Ghana. Maybe in Rwanda, there may be responsiveness, but maybe not to the extent in which it is done in Ghana. And even if you look at the Mo Ibrahim Index, it is only in participation, rights, and inclusion that Ghana is able to beat Rwanda. 5th against 31st. So in Rwanda, because of the rigid nature, there's lack of participation, not lack, relatively lack of participation, inclusion, and all those things. So they scored 35. It's 31 out of 54. Ghana scores 5 out of 54. But come and see, we tie in security and human rights, 11-11. Rwanda beat us in economic opportunities, 4th against 12. They beat us in human development, 10th against 13th. Do you understand? So it's a matter of relativity. That, and if you read the literature, there's something we call developmental autocracies. What others call developmental states. Autocracy and development, why should they go together? Because people assume that democracy, there's so much democratic recession across the world. And if you look at recent indices, the varieties of democracy, Freedom House, it shows that relatively people are drifting away from democracy because they believe it's not answering to being responsive to the needs of the people. So largely there's global democratic recession. But what fills in the gap is now more of what they call in the literature developmental autocracies. They are not democratic, but they are developing. So people now ask, is it the end or the means? Because when you look at a country like Rwanda, because democratic systems and all the principles of good governance that we discussed are not overly manifest, they are sitting on a time bomb. The development may okay, but let that strong, powerful leader exit. And then you now see the importance of those institutions, features that we discussed, and their absence in those countries playing out. So once we plant and nurture those features, it self-regulates even leaders that have dictatorial tendencies and move the system forward. Once they are lacking, then there's a problem. So finally, there is inconclusive relationship between democracy or the best form of government where we manifest, good governance can manifest, and development. There are outliers. The assumption is that democracies develop more, authoritarian regimes will progress. But if you look at the system, there are some democracies are not doing so much, some dictatorships are doing so much, but there are also outliers in all the system. So it is relativity, the extent to which these features are manifest, not completely non-existent. So your question was about democracy, the process of, not so hard. You see, if you look at the US and Britain and all those systems that we compare ourselves, when they were in this stage of development, their citizens were even putting more pressure and demanding more accountability from them than we are doing. But there's one significant thing we shouldn't miss. Development is both endogenous and exogenous. Now, the exogenous variables are even more compelling than the endogenous. To what extent will the enabling environment that allowed Britain, America, and most of the European Union countries to implement policies that have made them who they are now, to what extent can we implement same policies? It's completely very difficult. And if you read Professor Chang, prominent book, Kicking Away the Ladder, he tells you that in the, quoting from Frederick List, he said, and I quote, that it is a common clever device that when countries reach the summit of greatness, they kick away the ladder through which they climb, so that it becomes difficult for others to climb after them. Financial institutions, IMF, World Bank conditionalities, when these people were developing, where were those conditionalities? Go to WTO, TRIPS, NAMA, reciprocity, MFN, all those places, where were they? They were not even WTO when they were developing highly protectionist policies. But now we can't repeat the same thing. So the global environment is very, very, very difficult. Stifling of developmental space. So what our people are doing now, I don't think we are just being so hard on ourselves. We are just trying to build a perfect democracy that will lead to a more sustainable development.
Thank you. There are two issues about the Constitution and our culture. The Constitution and our culture and the role it plays in good governance and development. Unfortunately, I'm barred from asking another question, but I wish somebody could ask a question based on that. Constitution and our culture. Our culture has something it calls aseda. When I go and give something to a president, a minister, something, aseda. But people will say it's corruption. The chief thinks it's, if I go and give something to the chief says it's aseda, but people will say it's corruption. So we can't even agree on what is corruption. There are many, many aspects of our culture which some say is inhibiting the kind of democratic system we have adopted. But I can't ask questions, so I'll ask. And then fix the country are saying that until we change the constitution, we're not going to make any progress. Some say change aspects of the constitution. Who else wants to ask a question? Otherwise, I'll go ahead and ask all my questions. Yes, there's a gentleman whose hand is up. Yeah, please, your name, where you're coming from, before you ask your question. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Yakubu Mahmoud Umudi, coming from Iowa North constituency, and the president of Good Governance, Rights, and Justice. I must say, our panelists, you've done so well. But I don't know whether I should ask, what is the way forward? Because when you go through all the things that you said, I realize that if, I don't want to say we've stopped thinking as a nation, because, or we stopped doing what the main reason that the mind was given to us by the Supreme Being. Because as a nation, Ghana is now the third largest importer of tomatoes from Germany, where in our backyards we can just grow tomatoes and feed our nation. Food security, planting for food and jobs. Now we have more than 10% of the population cannot feed themselves. So what are we really doing? Is it that we stop thinking as a nation? Thank you very much.
Well, Alaji wants to know whether we'll stop thinking. I don't know who's going to answer that question. You're next. So please, here are the ground rules. Your name, where you're coming from, and then the third one is your question, but please make it snappy because we don't have the time. Go straight to the point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I am Ndichi Wandawaidia. I'm from the Dynamic Youth Movement of Ghana. My question is this. When we look at the Sustainable Development Goals and the various roles that countries are supposed to play, would inure to each citizen becoming more participatory, and that will give credence to good governance and democracy. Panelists, what is your take on the issue of decent jobs vis-a-vis the conversation we've had today from the doctor? What's your view on it? I want to know what your view on it. And I would want to ask specifically Professor Jampo and Professor Joanna. Yeah.
I like what you did. Your question was directed at a specific speaker or panel. That makes the work easier. We will break protocol and say that a chairperson, if she has anything to say, somebody asks a question and she thinks she can have something, she's free to do that. So, Madam Chairperson, please, we'll break some small protocol. You are allowed to say something or respond to any question that somebody asks if you believe it falls within your forte. So you are the third questioner. So 3 questions each, and then we'll come back to the House. Please give the mic.
Yeah. Okay. My name is Confidence Eche Adrako from University of Professional Studies. My question is, knowing the features of good governance and the relationship that exists between good governance and development, and the conditionalities of good governance. Not that our leaders don't know all this. They know before coming to power. So as Solidare Ghana, as civil society organizations, what is your stand when a particular government or a government is not following up these features to bring development to their nation? Thank you.
Okay, so it's Solidare Governance Forum, okay? Thank you very much. Now, I think it's a very important question. What is it that is making it difficult for us to do the right things? But was any question directed at you specifically? Not really. But I think there were some questions that directed at, 3 questions. I'll come back to you. So I think somebody asked the question. That's the Prophet question. Okay.
Well, what is my take on decent jobs? I don't know. There are no jobs, and the ones that are there are no jobs, and the ones that are there some of them are indecent. And so I think that rather than blaming the universities for producing people who are unemployable, I think we must embrace the real situation on the ground and put in proactive measures to deal with the factors that impede our efforts at creating decent jobs for our people. It is not as if the jobs are there and people went to look for it and they told them that you don't have the skill. It's not like that. And also, universities are not vocational training centers to provide vocational education, vocational skills. They are not. They are supposed to train you to make you a fertile mind so that you become receptive to other training when you get out of school. That's what we do in a university. That's how come a former student who studied linguistics, classics, and philosophy is heading a bank. The mind is fertile. So my take on decent jobs, the jobs are not there. The few are not decent. Let us think through as a people, and rather than just offering handout, token solution, let us begin to think about what we can do. The budget that has been presented, I'm told that there is an intervention that would help young people start their business. My challenge is, we've heard about some of these interventions. They go to party full soldiers. Whether they have what it takes to set up their own businesses or not, doesn't matter. So you see, we tickle ourselves and laugh a lot in our country. Politics in Ghana is made up of so many ideas. Today, I was listening to a minister. The ideas are many, but you see, ideas alone do not bring about development. You see, if you have ideas, then there should be resources, and then also there should be commitment to implementing the ideas. Okay, maybe I won't come again. So somebody was asking, what is the way forward? I think the way forward is still, looking at the confines and contours of this lecture that has been given, the way forward, as far as I'm concerned, is for all of us to commit ourselves to the ideals of good governance. Because my colleague, Dr. Alidu, hinted, okay, I realize he didn't want to say it louder, but he hinted that even in the so-called dictatorships that have developed, you can find traces of the features of good governance amongst them. Those who do not believe in good governance but have developed, if you go study them, you would see that they have some elements of the good governance that have been discussed here. So for me, the way forward is a rigid commitment to the ideals of good, not the one we pussyfoot here. We are always ticking the box, politics of ticking the box. They say we should do this, Maye, I've done it, Maye, and no. But the kind of, if they say consensus building, you see how many times didn't the MPs announce that, oh, we'll consult, we'll build consensus. Today I have seen, he just showed me, I think, a draft bill that has been sent to Parliament about the E-levy, and the figure there, the amount there is still 1.75. And they said, oh, we are consulting. What kind of, okay, you.
Hello?
Hello, good. The CSOs, there was a question on CSOs. Please let Mensah Thompson respond to that, and then I'll come to you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Well, I think the job that we do is very important. A few days ago, I was telling somebody that you see the level of corruption and impunity going on in our country now. And all these are happening when CSOs, the media, and a whole lot of activists are strongly always hating the government, always exposing the government, always making sure that we for once have been labeled as the king of petitioners. Unless we don't see it, we'll go to the relevant agency and make sure that the matter is investigated. But even in the midst of this, look at the level of corruption and impunity going on. So can you imagine if CSOs do not exist, if the media do not exist, if nobody is complaining, if nobody is doing anything about what is going on, maybe it would have been worse. Maybe we'll wake up one day and Ghana is missing because the country has been sold. So, I think that, we may not see the desired results that we expect to see. We may not see the expected progress or the response. It may not be as expedient as we want it to be. But trust me, the little things that we are doing day in and day out, at least is sending the signal to the people who have resolved to loot this country that at least there's some eyes watching. And if anything at all, if you are caught or the matter comes to light, it will be sent to the appropriate agency for it to be investigated. Only the people who are looting are becoming more and more clever. So we also have to find ways to become clever to match them up. But that is a reality on the ground. And so we cannot give up yet. We still have to do the little role that, the little things that we do. But I also want to add that the job must not only be left for civil society organizations. It shouldn't. We, the citizens, have even a much bigger role to play. Because we can only do as much. At the end of the day, what is the public saying? What is the public doing? Because in the midst of all what is going on in the country now, a few days ago, we saw the expenditures for COVID. And in the midst of COVID, in the midst of social distancing, in the midst of a ban on public gathering, 32 million Ghana cedis was spent on conferences. How do you justify this? But still, we have spoken our part, but you are all sitting down. Nobody has said a word. Okay? We take bills to Parliament. They've taken the e-levy to Parliament.
You think the citizens are not angry enough?
They are not.
Really?
Because
maybe they're tired.
Because you have representatives in Parliament.
Yes.
Your member of Parliament is going to vote for this e-levy. When he comes back to constituency, you are going to follow him and collect 1 cedi. At the end of the day, nobody's asking the members of Parliament, our representatives, why they are taking certain decisions in the House. Nobody's asking them any question. So at the end of the day, you leave the job only for a few civil society organizations who are putting their lives and everything on the line to expose some of these things, while the citizens watch on, sometimes in a way as if they don't care. And that is the participation that Dr. Alidu talked about. It's an integral aspect of democracy. If the citizens do not participate, if we do not, take part in the democratic process and ensure that we demand accountability, then we're still going to see the kind of things we keep seeing around us.
Okay.
And then it's only civil society organizations who can make as little impact as we can.
Mr. Thompson, I sense some frustration in your submission. It's like you rightly said, the civil society organizations can only do so much. If the citizenry do not set up and demand for what they think is due them, we were not going to get anywhere.
Well, just a sec. Just a second. You see, again, recently there was an issue that came up. I think one of the leaders of Fix the Country, Oliver and Franklin, we had this conversation. And when issues happen in the country, all of us, but why are CSOs not talking? Why are CSOs not doing this? Why are CSOs not doing that? Has anybody sat down to think how CSOs operate in this country? Today, we are on the platform of Solidare Ghana. Do we have any idea what it takes to put a forum like this together? Nobody seems to be contributing. And we think that, we feel entitled to the advocacies of CSOs that, they are doing this. CSOs, go and talk. You have to go and do this. But do you have any idea how it takes to run a CSO in this country? And nobody seems to be making any contribution. So the participation is not just being angry, but the little effort that you can do to support the work of civil society organizations, such as forums like this one, is also part of the participation that we are talking about.
Thank you. That's a very, very laudable, brilliant submission. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we don't have all the time. We're running out of time, so you're already putting pressure on me.
Let me do a quick add-up.
Just a quick one, please.
On the issue of CSOs.
Yes, please do.
I think let's have this clarity. CSO includes everybody. It's a citizens' mass movement. It includes teachers, it includes priests. Look, in the past, it had been the religious bodies and the priests who took the lead with CSO mass movements. So I think we should make that clarity. Remember, Drop That Chamber, it was not on the list of anybody else. It was for everybody else. Did you see the impact of the Drop That Chamber? When the citizens said no, it was a no. It's only about making sure you involve everybody and explain for people to understand. Now, you ask for the way forward. For the way forward, I think, in all this discussion, I ask a simple question. Where and what has been the role of the National Development Planning Commission? Let's upgrade it to a National Development Planning Authority. Let them have that authority, not to only plan, they should monitor, assess, plus also direct and correct the development processes. They should also have a national development plan that we all agree on with a very good communication strategy, which will be the National Development Planning Commission's work to deal with. Now, when we are going forward on all the points, I'll conclude and say, government has a business doing business. We always say government has no business doing business. Allow the private sector. Look, government has a business doing business. Let the state-owned enterprises work and make profits. Government must ensure that we protect our local industries. We shouldn't allow people to import things that will come and compete with our local produce. Look at the poultry industry. We totally have lost out. We had everything to do. And then finally, let's fairly distribute what we have as a country. While doing that, let's make sure we fight corruption.
Okay.
Corruption still keeps going high.
Okay.
From 5 billion, this year we are at 12 billion. I don't know what next year would be. Thank you.
Mr. Okansi, thank you. Thank you so very much. Please put your hands together for our able speakers. Oh, you want to say something? Oh, I beg you. 30 seconds, 30 seconds. I beg you, 30 seconds.
I thought we were going to have the opportunity.
No, because of time. Because of time, yeah.
No, on the way forward, I think it's very important we continue conversations like this.
Right.
I mean, as you alluded, there is some sort of fatigue in the system. Indeed, it appears that the views of CSOs are not taken seriously. And also the orientation of CSOs. You must also sometimes appreciate that you are an interface between the people and the ruling class. And so where the people appear to be tired, you must also find ways to carry them along. And platforms of this nature help to sensitize the people, educate them, inform them, so they can actively participate in the discourse of our country. Indeed, on the issue of jobs, it's, of course, a huge challenge for government, for policymakers. Anytime we talk about the institutions of training not producing graduates that are employable, sometimes I ask myself, is it the case that we can't, or Ghana's economy cannot make space for everyone regardless of your employability, your skill set? I think a good economy should be able to make space for even a GHS leaver.
Right.
A good economy should be able to make space for even a primary 6 leaver who maybe ended at primary 6 and still in the system. It's not really about what is even skill set. We need to interrogate these things, have the proper framing. And it connects to the issue of, are we even thinking? Sometimes it's an issue of framing. How we frame our challenges, our problems, would to a large extent help us in addressing the challenges of the day. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. Professor Dowona, I don't know whether you have anything quickly to add. Okay, so he spared us. Please put your hands together for him too. Yes. We thank you so very much. So we want to, first of all, on behalf of Solidare Governance Forum, thank our distinguished, brilliant, awesome speakers. They've done such a marvelous job. So they'll go back to their seats, and then we will get the chairperson to give us the concluding remarks, and then we'll take it from there. Please put your hands together one more time for them. Thank you. All right. So, yes, so what is going to happen, as I did indicate, is that we would get the chairperson to give us her concluding remarks, after which we'll take our closing prayers, and then we will all go to our various destinations. Now, let me acknowledge the Deputy National Youth Organizer of the NDC, Edem Agbana, is with us here. Please put your hands together for him. Thank you so very much for joining us, big man. Right, so Madam Chairperson, any few words for our audience before you take leave of us?
Thank you very much. And I just want to say thank you all for sticking with us to the end. All too soon we have come to the end, and I believe you and I will agree that this has been extremely insightful and very thought-provoking lecture and discussion. Your presence here and your contributions also amply testify that we are all in this together, and so I say a huge thank you to all of you. Distinguished members of the panel, distinguished colleague fellows of Solidare Ghana, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, as our session comes to a close, please allow me to share with you some of the highlights that, from this lecture and discussions, which are summarized by one Egyptian-born American technologist and writer, Ramos Naim, who once wrote, we've seen over time that countries that have the best economic growth are those that are good, that have good governance. And good governance comes from freedom of communication. It comes from ending corruption. It comes from a populace that can go online to say, this politician is corrupt, or this administrator or public official is corrupt. Not disrespectfully, but factually, letting our leaders know what is and what is not acceptable. My take home from this lecture, and I'll be very brief, on good governance has been that one, good governance is the creation of good systems and the use of these systems by members who have the necessary skill set and technical know-how to ensure performance, to ensure sustainable development. Good governance also ensures the proper utilization of resources of the state for its citizens to ensure this sustainable development and growth. Again, good governance requires that the people in government are held to the highest conduct, and the failure to uphold such conduct must attract the right disciplinary measures to deter others from following the same path. I've heard today that development may seem complex and somewhat daunting, but I say today that it need not be so. We can simplify things in the layman's terms to mean let us all do our part to ensure that there is indeed sustainable government. I would like to express my personal gratitude to our main speaker, Dr. Alidu Saidu, for that great presentation. Our members of panel who also dived into this and made very meaningful logic and assumptions about this, and also recommendations on how this can be achieved. I say thank you to you all. I'd also like to thank you all on behalf of Solidare Ghana for the trust you have invested in us and for your time today. To the media partners, social reporters, and all who worked so hard to make this a great session today, I say thank you very much. I leave you all today with a quote from President Joe Biden, who said that fighting corruption is not just good governance, it is self-defense, and it is patriotism. As we go home today, let us leave with a great conviction that we are all going to be active participants of good governance, and we will do our best and hold the government to higher standards for which they were elected for. On this note, ladies and gentlemen, I hereby declare today's session closed. Thank you so much for coming, and may God bless our homeland, Ghana. Thank you.
And make us great and strong. Thank you, Ms. Barbara Echampo. So at this juncture, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we'll take the closing prayer, and then we'll take some pictures. After taking some pictures, we'll go downstairs, lunch is ready, and then we'll take it from there. Al-Haji Mohammed, or Sheikh Mohammed Awal, if you're here, please give us, yes, he's a Sheikh. Yes, give it for him. You're a Sheikh, aren't you?
I am neither the two. Thank you. Well, let's pray. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdina as-siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladzina an'amta alayhim. Ghayril maghdubi alayhim waladdallin. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم وبارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد المجيد آمين.
That's His Eminence Mohammed Awad. Thank you for that powerful prayer.